Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Deusto Business School. For those who don't know me yet, my name is Macarena Cuenca, and I currently serve as Dean of this business school. And first, I want to thank the Emaldi Foundation, because without their support, this event would not be possible. And thanks to the funding we receive, we are able to bring international scholars and speakers who open our minds by offering new perspectives and enriching the debate. I also want to thank Deusto Business alumni, of course, for always being there, ready to listen to our proposals, and for organizing this event and engaging our alumni network. As you have seen in the invitation, this event is entitled Humanizing Companies to Humanize Society, and is also organized in collaboration with the Arizmendiarrieta Foundation. 2026 is a very special year for the foundation, as it marks the 50th anniversary of the death of Father Arizmendiarrieta, founder of the Mondragon cooperative experience. Cooperatives are excellent examples of what humanistic leadership means, and that's why bringing together Lowney, the Arizmendiarrieta Foundation, and the Deusto Business Schools makes perfect sense. For Deusto Business School, humanistic leadership is at the heart of our identity as a Jesuit university. Developing humanistic leaders is part of our mission, and that's why our new business management and administration degree, we have 3 courses, 18 ECTS, devoted to values-based education. In this context, our undergraduate students are encouraged to undertake volunteering experiences and or attend personal development workshops to increase their self-awareness. Humanistic leadership is also a hallmark of our postgraduate and executive education programs, as well as of much of our research we conduct. Last year, with the help of our advisory board, we made a significant effort to articulate a definition of what humanistic leadership means for Deusto Business School. This is the definition we finally arrived at after many discussions. I will read it to you, and this is published on our website. A leadership that, based on self-awareness and collaboration with stakeholders, places human dignity at the center in order to generate economic and social value. But let's focus on today's event. As you know, the expected duration of the main session is 1 hour, and afterwards we will have coffee and a possibility of interacting informally for an additional half an hour. During the formal session, we will have 2 very complementary perspectives. First, Lowney will frame the humanistic leadership approach, and then Jon Emadi from the Arizmendiarrieta Foundation will present a concrete study of the inclusive participative company model. Jon, in addition to being a member of the Arizmendiarrieta Foundation, is also a partner at Laboral Kutxa and a retired professor here at Deusto Business School. But let me introduce Lowney. Chris recently finished his term as board chair of Common Spirit Health, America's largest nonprofit health system, with $37 billion in annual revenue and more than 150,000 employees. He currently serves on the board of Whitgiver, the leading executive search and consultancy firm for the healthcare and higher education markets. A former Jesuit seminarian, he later served as a managing director of JP Morgan and on 3 continents. A sought-after keynote speaker, he has lectured in more than 2,000 countries on leadership, ethics, and decision-making. He's the author of 6 books and co-author of 2 more, including his best-selling Heroic Leadership, which has been translated into 11 languages and was named to recommended list in the recommended reading list of the Commandant of the United States of the Marine Corps. So as some of you may know, Chris visited us 2 years ago, and we are very honored to have him here again with us, exploring new ways of longer-term collaboration. So thank you, Chris, for accepting the invitation, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. How's the microphone? It's working okay? Ok, y unas pocas palabras en español. que estudié el español con los jesuitas, pero parece que no aprendí bien. Y por eso no puedo presentar en inglés. Y discúlpame que todo el mundo tiene que hablar en inglés, pero con las preguntas puedo entender un poquito si hablo despacio, y pueden ayudarme con traducción si es necesario. Here is my email address, and I'm very happy to be in touch. If after you have some question or comment, by all means, send an email. If you want the slides, then I will gladly send them to you, okay? Well, let me say, for me, it's great to have this opportunity, not only in Deusto and with old friends, but the topic for me is very interesting. You know, for Americans, this movement in País Vasco is not very well understood, and I think it really offers some important themes and ideas for us to think about all over the world. And so I'm glad to share my own ideas, hear from Jon, and we have a discussion, okay? And always, when I give talks of any kind, now always I begin with the same kind of context, which seems so superficial and foolish. Is the world now complex, changing fast, confusing? And of course, everybody agrees. And we have this acronym we sometimes use, that we live in a world that we'll get there. Okay, vamos a ver. We live in a world that's become VUCA. Yo creo que a veces en España se dice BANI. It's complex, it's changing fast, and so on. And to me, it's really essential context, because when it comes to companies, universities, hospitals, 15 years ago, running them well was a management problem. In other words, we have some understanding how to run a hospital. We have some understanding how to run a university, how to run an electric company. But when everything has become completely volatile and confusing, it's, of course, a management problem, but also it's a real leadership problem in this respect, that surely leadership, forget about exact definition, informally has something to do with, okay, here's where we are now, where should we go? And when everything is changing, it becomes very difficult and confusing to make decisions about we need to go here. So this is why I think the context is very important. And I'm going to talk about leadership ideas. And before I do, I'll just say this, that I think for people in this room, I suspect the moral values of a group like this, it's not just the reality that things are changing, it's also the way things are changing. And I will not read the things on this page. You can read it. I guess if we took 1/2 hour, we would add many more disturbing trends to this list. So we have a leadership problem anyway, because things are changing fast. And for many of us, I think we also have a leadership problem of, oh man, I'm not happy with the way things are going. Can we change things in a different direction, which is an even more difficult leadership problem. So here is our context, and I'm going to share leadership ideas that in a way come from two companies, especially the first company. So as you heard from Macarena, after la secundaria, pasé unos años como seminarista de los jesuitas. And In Spain, you know what is the Jesuits. In the United States, we just say Jesuits or Society of Jesus, pero generalmente en España se dice la compañía. It's a company. And I was in this company, and then I spent, after I discerned my calling in life is not to be a priest, I ended up in J.P. Morgan, also a company. And well, I don't say this as a joke, but for a serious reason, which is we need to, in the context of this morning, think about what is a company. Because as those who speak Spanish or Romance language know very well, a company is two words. It's the word for with or together, con, and the word for bread, pan. So, in the Middle Ages, we understood what was a company is maybe a group of friends, could be a little military unit, but in some subconscious level, it has the idea of the people with whom I break bread. And of course, for Jesuits and Christians, also there's somehow a spiritual dimension of breaking bread together, well, this is a company. And the word companion, it's the same word, of course, right? Compañero. And, well, I guess in the etymology of these words, they have something in common. I'm with my compañeros in mi company, but today in the United States, I guess also in Spain, frankly, usually mis compañeros have nothing to do with the company. They are my friends outside with whom I can complain about how miserable is the life inside the company with these people. And so in a way, our words, I think, can teach us something about where we came from, where we are now, and maybe where we need to go. Can we recover some of this original idea of what is a company? And as I was leaving J.P. Morgan, I was going to write something about leadership and draw on lessons of the Jesuits. And some of my motivation was the ideas about leadership that were current in the culture of that time. And at a very high level, I'll briefly mention 4 of these ideas that for me were rather disturbing in the business culture of the time. One, that good leadership is not superficial, but somehow it's profound. So often the way leadership was presented or is presented in these books is just, oh, you do certain things, this is leadership. But in reality, it's something much deeper, I think, which gets to the second point, that often the way leadership is presented in books and even some courses, not in a place like Deusto, but other places, leadership is about tricks or tips. If I do something to this guy, he will do what I want. So somehow it's like he's a trained animal and leadership is manipulative. And in fact, I think, no, it's something much deeper. And the third idea, often leadership is presented as like an act. You know, like in other words, I come to J.P. Morgan and I play a certain role, an actor, the leader. This is how leaders perform. Then I leave work and I become, once again, myself. And well, also, this is, I want to say a bad word, but I shouldn't say it. This is nonsense. Let me just say this way. You know, and it leads to a kind of a split life, that we play one role at work, and then we are real people in other settings, and it's just crazy. And then the last idea, that leadership is not just concrete, but somehow is deeply spiritual. And I say this even when I give talks to business people in very concrete industries. Manufacturing, buildings, manufacturing this. And I make this point. I say, well, you all know accounting, these chief executives. I say, you all know accounting. And we all know that this building in accounting has value. It costs $1 million to build it. It's on our balance sheet. We depreciate it. And by the way, what is the value of the people who work in your company? 0, accounting tells us. Maybe some deferred pension or something, but basically it's nothing. There's nothing on the balance sheet for human beings. But even the most atheist, materialistic business person in the world will agree, of course not. The building has very minimal value. What really has value are the people who come every day, how they behave, what they know, how they treat each other. And these kinds of things we can't put on a balance sheet. So in a dictionary way, we could say they're somehow spiritual. They're not material. So with this, these kinds of ideas in mind, I tried to take some best practices, as I understood them, from what we might call the culture, the work culture of the Jesuits, especially the early Jesuits. They would not call it a work culture, huh? But in a way, they had this idea, because those of you who know the Jesuit way, I guess this one knows it, knows that often the early Jesuits use the phrase, nuestro modo de proceder. And if you read definitions of corporate culture, the informal one is usually the way we do things around here. Modo de proceder. So they had a kind of a culture, and I structured the book around 4 values that for me you could observe in the way they write, the way they act, the way they interact with another. And I will not go through all of these in any detail. I'm sure you can more or less read them and see what I'm saying. In each case, I put the word I used in the book, but also which idea within Jesuit language I was trying to capture. And let me make this point that is relevant for Jesuits and leadership, but maybe a little bit also for the ideas that you're all trying to share in this movement. That, well, take something like Cura Personalis. If I write a book for people in the United States in business, who knows what is Cura Personalis? Nobody. And maybe it will take me pages and pages to explain this Latin concept. And so I felt like part of my problem, and maybe also part of your problem in this movement, is how do we explain and translate some of our ideas that might for us have specific language, specific history, specific context, and make them accessible to people in very different contexts. You understand what I say? Okay, so this is what I tried to do in the book. I don't mean to imply that when I say eroismo or love or self-awareness, I am 100% capturing Jesuit religious spirituality. Of course not. I'm trying to translate an idea to a broader community. So this was the focus of the book, and I'm mindful of time because also Jon will be speaking. So what I just will do is very briefly talk about how 3 of these ideas are, to my mind, so deeply relevant to our VUCA business culture today. So I'm trying to make the point that this is not ideas from a museum that are not relevant or that are only relevant for nice people or religious people. I'm trying to make the point that this is a way to show good leadership. And I think from Jon, you will also hear some clear alignment of these ideas. In fact, I think many of these ideas are more important now than 25 years ago when I wrote the book, than 500 years ago when Ignatius is living. So I'll very superficially touch on 3 of them, and in each case, I'll try to give some quote from leadership literature to help us understand how we make the connection and why it's important. So, first I want to come to an idea of being a loving leader. Okay? You'll remember this was one of the 4 ideas. Well, here is a definition of leadership that the military service in the United States uses, which I find very powerful, very useful. And I bring your attention to this one phrase, winning the obedience, confidence, respect, and cooperation of the team. Well, this is the military. They use the word obedience. Also, Father, you use the word obedience in your vows. But I guess for most of us in organizational life, obedience does not ring so nicely. So we can take away this word and let's just leave, how do we win? How do we win the confidence, cooperation, and loyalty of our team? Because especially in VUCA, when it's very confusing, very difficult, if we cannot win the loyalty of the team, get people to say, oh my God, I know it's terrible, I know it's confusing, but I want to be on this team. This is a core leadership task, huh? If I cannot do it, I cannot lead. And now, to make the connection to the idea of being loving, I'm going to show you the results of a survey that McKinsey and Company did. You know McKinsey, the large consulting firm. And they surveyed their big clients, customers, and asked them to explain what are the qualities of the best leaders in their company, okay? And then they collected and analyzed all this data, and they wrote an article with about 20 best practices for the most effective leaders. And I'm going to show you on the next page about 10 of the qualities, so more than half of what McKinsey said. And of course, we know McKinsey is not to be nice, huh? I mean, McKinsey is to make money. That's what they're doing. But you will look at this list, and I know that if I had said to this group, okay, why don't you tell me what kinds of behaviors would indicate a loving way of treating teams and employees. And we had small groups, and you all sat down, you would come up with this list, basically. Here it is, and tell me if I'm right. Okay, so the case I'm trying to make, once again, we remind us, we need good leadership. It's a crazy VUCA world. We need good leadership. There are some ideas about leadership that I take from the Jesuit company that we're also going to hear about from the cooperative movement best practices. And I think some of the best practice ideas that come out of these 2 models are completely validated and affirmed by some of the most stringent research on what good leadership looks like. Huh? Let's move on quickly to reinforcing another idea, namely that, which one? Self-aware? Yeah. Namely that effective leaders need to be self-aware. This was a core idea I wrote about. And now I will show you a quote from Daniel Goleman, who many of you know helped to popularize the movement that we call emotional intelligence some years ago. It's basically self-awareness tasks. Huh? And look at what he says. When I compared star performers with average ones in senior leadership positions, nearly 90% of the difference was attributable to emotional intelligence factors rather than cognitive abilities. He uses a phrase, emotional intelligence, but what he means by emotional intelligence is basically the same as what I would talk about with self-awareness. Do you understand your own strength and weakness? Do you understand other people? Do you have some empathy? Do you understand how they are reacting? So, once again, we have as part of our ideas, part of our model, an idea, in this case self-awareness, that is being completely validated by the best leadership thinking nowadays. And the last one I want to very briefly try to connect to best practice today is what I call heroismo, what in the Jesuit context they might say the magis. And the way I try to capture that for a very general, non-religious audience is that good leadership, at its root, you care not about yourself first, but about some project, some goal that is much bigger than self. For Jesuits, of course, it's for God's greater glory. We might say in a business context, will we work for the common good and not just for my own ego, my own salary, my own status, my own promotion, and so on. Okay? So this would be the concept. And now we see, we could look at Jim Collins, another well-respected leadership thinker. And here's what his research concludes about what he calls level 5 leaders, the most effective leaders. Level 5 leadership, blah, 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 display a powerful mixture of personal humility and will. They're ambitious, but their ambition is first and foremost for the cause, for the organization and its purpose, not itself. This is his way of saying, okay, if you lead well, you need to put aside some of your ego drive and submit yourself to a bigger purpose. Well, I think that in the context in which we're living, in a VUCA context, leadership is extremely important. I think that some of the ideas that we inherit from La Compañía are incredibly relevant. I think the research shows that. And I think we're going to hear now that some of these ideas from La Compañía really integrate very well with a movement right here from the País Vasco in terms of its vision of how companies should integrate. And therefore, as I finish, let me say, isn't it interesting that we have two visionaries from País Vasco that have shared so many very interesting ideas about what good leadership looks like. And before I sit down, given where we are in this place, I should also recognize, I thought I had another, I had another couple of leaders from País Vasco that would be well known here, Father Arupe and Garate, but their pictures didn't make it. And let me also say, I've referenced the movement a lot, but also this place where we're sitting is really promoting and enshrining exactly this vision of leadership. And Macarena mentioned the idea of humanistic leadership, and look at the way it's defined. It's exactly aligned and in keeping with everything that's been said so far. So thank you for paying attention. I hope those ideas are interesting. I look forward to Jon's presentation and then our discussion. Thank you. This one? Okay.
Thanks a lot. Chris has introduced me saying that the ideas of this humanistic or Jesuit leadership are very much aligned with the ideas of Arizmendiarrieta. And I'm speaking in the name of Arizmendiarrieta Foundation. Arizmendiarrieta was a priest who launched he called it the Mondragon Cooperative Experience, and I stress the idea of experience because it was very important for him. As Macarena has already said, this is the 15th anniversary of the death of Arizmendiarrieta, and so we are calling it Arizmendiarrieta en Urtea, in Basque language, the year of Arizmendiarrieta, and the subtitle is the year of the humanistic company. And from Arizmendiarrieta Foundation, we try to spread the ideas of Arizmendiarrieta, not only in cooperative, but also in the usual public limited companies. And the first thing I would like to say is that the ideas of Arizmendiarrieta, as we have already said, are completely aligned with those on Jesuit leadership that Chris explains. Chris has spoken about those four values that are the base on the Jesuit leadership. Self-awareness. Well, these are not the very words of Arizmendiarrieta. Those are the idea that a priest had no interest in sins is something that I understand from a follower of him. This girl used to say that when you went to confess with Arizmendiarrieta, he will listen to your faults. I suppose that in 1960s, mostly related with sex, I suppose. And from that, he will, when you finish, he will begin asking you, well, what about your efforts? What about the way you behave? What about the way you relate with others? What about solidarity with the others? Because he would like to make you aware of some aspects that nobody would ever find in a list of sins. He was more interested in self-awareness. In genuity, I like this one, not lament, but action, for instance. Or on love. Love in the sense of finding the possibilities and the ways to develop other people and helping them to develop them. Well, that's exactly the way Arizmendiarrieta worked. When he went into Mondragon, the first thing he did was to build up a second professional school for those people who were not able to join the existing professional school in Mondragon. And from this professional school, his students have launched the cooperatives. At present, cooperatives giving work posts for 86,000 people in the 5 continents with production plants. And this small professional school at present is Mondragon University. So he was able to put into practice this idea of developing the possibilities of everyone. And those are some of his words as well. On education, for instance, he said, we have to socialize knowledge in order to democratize power. Very strong, isn't it? Or this other on progress. Progress is not about acquiring more, but about being more, acting better, or giving more. Another value, the fourth value that Chris has mentioned is heroism. Heroism in the sense of looking for a greater good, looking for something which is more important than yourself. And see, those are the ideas he gave. For instance, the world is not given to us to contemplate it, but to transform it. Or these other cooperative entities must be agents of development, promoting a new social order. Or this one, I like it very much as well. Cooperativism is not an end, but it's a means. And taking this into account, I would like to introduce you briefly some insights into the IPCM, we call it Inclusive Participatory participative company model. Here we've got a booklet trying to give references, good practices, even indicators to follow the implementation of this model. Sorry. Of this model, which takes into account those behaviors that have been successful in the companies, in the cooperative companies, and put them into also the conventional limited, the public and limited companies. The main idea is why those things that are successful, because we can get at the same time profitability and competitiveness, and also a humanistic climate within the company, and higher satisfaction of the people who are working there. And that's what we think can be done. The first idea came, the principles of this model came from an association called Arizmendiarrieta's Friends, and they proposed them in the parliaments, both the Navarrese parliament and the Basque parliament. And both parliaments approved those ideas and asked their government to implement them. So we are now trying to implement them in Basque land. Basque land being Basque country and Navarre. Some insights on them. They've got 4 pillars, four axes. First being a shared project, where the project itself is more important than the interest of every stakeholder, including owners, including workers as well. And another very important part of those ideas are reinvestment and innovation. And as a consequence, for instance, a quantitative reference could be limiting the payout from the annual profits and putting most of them, 50% of annual profits, increasing own funds in order to be able to innovate and to make new investments. And second, a culture of trust. A culture of trust through a systematic information transparency, which also needs some other questions, such as a systematic training plan for all workers, or in order to get cohesion, limitations on payments. So in our SMEs, in the usual SMEs here in Basque Land, we think that a limitation of 1 to 6, meaning that the highest salary shouldn't be bigger or larger than 6 times the lowest payment will be needed in order, as I said, to get cohesion. Third, trying to change confrontation into cooperation, and that through the participation of the people, at least in management and in profits, which means putting into practice a real systematic participatory management systems and tools, and in order to empower teams and individuals, and so doing, get a co-responsibility from them, and co-responsibility in the innovation processes that you have to put into practice. And as a consequence also, the profit should be shared by everyone in the company. Fourth, social concern. The company should take into account the needs of the society at large, and so it should involve itself in those situations where, or in those projects that are very closely related with them. For instance, it's very important, we think, to be involved in professional training, in plans from the public sector about professional training, and also giving some money to social responsibility activities. What else? Well, we have identified some dozens of different companies here, and even non-profits as well, and even we are identifying at present not private but public societies also that are doing their management according with this model, with this IPCM model. And with them, we are finding a real treasure in the sense that all of them are implementing best practices in different fields of management. And with this treasure, we want to share it with other companies and with other non-profits that are convinced that it's possible, what I have said already, which is to increase your profitability and your competitiveness, and at the same time to put into practice humanistic ways of behavior that make people feel better. In Caja Laboral, we used to say that when you treat your workers differently, they will treat your clients differently. And if you treat them better, they will treat better the client. And also, if you empower them, they will be able to give a better personal relationship with the clients because the answer will be faster and they will be able to solutionate the client's needs faster. And I'll finish with this last idea that, sorry, I haven't finished explaining Humanizar. Humanizar is a club that we want to build, and we are building first with those best practices that we are identifying in those companies that already are implementing in this IPCM model, but opening it to other companies and non-profits and even public societies that think that humanizing companies is well worth. And as I said, I'll finish with this purpose here, which is our way in the foundation, in the Arizmendiarrieta Foundation, our way of seeing things, that we think that humanizing our companies, we will also humanize our societies. Okay. Yes.
Okay, so you need to jump a little bit here. Okay, thank you very much, Chris. Thank you very much, Jon. And now we open the floor to some questions here in the room. I think there will be open mics. Yeah, that's right. We have a mic? Okay. So it's just like raise your hand if you want to ask anything. And okay, so in the meantime, okay, so here we have the first question. That was, yeah, I think you will get the mic, and just that we already, okay, thank you.
So thank you very much to you, Chris and Jon, and everyone making this happen. My question, sorry about asking for tips and tricks, but from the powerful title of today's talk, here at the university and the Deusto Business School as well, we're kind of called to train or shape these people who should humanize companies to humanize societies. And one of my main concerns these days is about this dilemma or gap that we have about thinking, when we think about leaders and when we think about humanists. I would say that young generations, but also us, if we think about a role model, about just top of mind names of leaders, we would go for ruthless politicians, CEOs, male many times, or even football players and military references as well. But humanism would be around Gandhi, Mandela, or Peace Nobel Prize winners. And my ask for help here is how you think we could, first your reflection on this, whether you share this concern, and then tips and tricks or some advice about how from the university we can help narrow this gap, this mental split, or however we can frame it. So humanistic leadership, it is at the core of leadership, not kind of a soft version of leadership. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Sophia. So I don't know if it's a tough question. So I think Sophia is coordinating here this course that I was mentioning before about values-based education, which is called Experiences for Humanistic Leadership. And I think we have like the perfect ground to have these discussions with our undergraduates. And so any advice here, well, of course, we all have lots of predetermined ideas in our minds, no? And it's how can you help us to deal with this?
Do you want me to go first?
Yes, please.
So first, I think the way you frame the question is exactly right. I mean, I would observe the same dilemma, and I will make a couple of comments from the U.S. context, and either it's relevant or not. So one is that I think we underestimate part of what you say about how powerful a stereotype has been planted in people's minds. So it's not a matter that people are coming, they haven't thought about leadership, and we're going to introduce them to the idea. Instead, my perception is people are coming with subconsciously, but very strong ideas about what does it mean to lead in society, And very frankly, whether one is Republican or conservative or liberal in the United States, this is a perfect example. Very young people are absorbing at some level impressions about how to behave and so on. So the first thing is, yes, I think there's a necessity to propose very different models very consciously, not thinking I'm working on a blank tablet, but instead understanding that there are some strong ideas I have to push back against persuasively. So that's one thing. And you'll see that you infer, I'm sure, that the way I present things is in a way not just this is what a nice person should do or a moral person should do. It's true, I hope. But also, it works, so to speak, And I think it's going to be very hard to convince people unless we can also make a case that, as I remember from my philosophy, a big debate was there is the beautiful thing to do, the right thing to do, the moral thing to do, and then there's the good, the efficient thing to do, the expedient thing to do. And if the only way we can make our case, it's ultimately the most important way, but if the only way is this is the beautiful thing to do, it may never work, but it's the beautiful thing to do, I think it's going to be hard to be convincing. So to me, ways we could say this is the beautiful and it's efficient is important. And that is part of the reason why I like part of the cooperative model and ideas of best practices and idea of success, because it's a way of saying there's a different way of doing things that can be successful. And we don't have this kind of pushback. We don't have these alternative models coming to the forefront a lot. So those are a couple of my thoughts.
Jon?
Yeah. When we try to implement this management model here, we don't speak a lot about leadership. We mostly speak about behaviors that really help going in this line of humanistic management. And that's because even if the first step should always be leadership, you need people convinced, not very many people, but you need some people convinced that in this brave new world we are in, you really need to change dramatically the relationship within the company in order to be able to be profitable and to be competitive. And so we take for granted that someone is convinced that those changes should be done, and he will take the risk to do it. And to limit this risk, we say, okay, we would like to give some guidelines on some good practices or some even indicators in order to follow a journey that others have done before and that really have proved that this dilemma of productivity and humanistic culture, let's say, or humanistic relationship is possible. So, as I said, the first step is always on leadership, but we stress the importance of the model that you implement when you try to put into practice those ideas.
Okay, thank you. So we have some tips. Yeah?
Thank you very much, Chris and Jon, and of course to the Foundation for making this dialogue happen. And I wanted to ask you about one of the things that both of you have pointed to. So it's knowledge, both knowledge and the commitment to develop this knowledge. And I will say that maybe in the last 15 years, one of the main changes that is interlinked with other changes that Chris has mentioned is that there is a push towards non-scientific beliefs. So there is what they call the dark enlightenment. There is people that have proposed to inject bleach to fight COVID, or you have influencers that say that they have had enough of experts, and you don't need to have knowledge to talk about things. And of course, everybody's entitled to have an opinion, but maybe they shouldn't expect that opinion to be respected as others. And how can we, or how can leaders just push towards this knowledge-based decision-making when we have, and increasingly among the youngest, we have this wave of people that don't believe in science, that don't believe in experts, that they, well, doubt about almost everything.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Yeah. So you have any easy question?
That's for later.
I guess this is not the audience for easy questions.
I have a couple of thoughts, but the short answer is I don't know. Huh? I mean, this is a societal problem we have, but I share the couple of thoughts I have, and in the context of a business school, you know, you're asking a much broader question about a broader societal issue, and I'm answering with a narrower focus than your question, so I apologize. But two things that come to my mind are, so first, before coming exactly to the problem you mentioned, just the general challenge or problem of people valuing self-awareness, because I think that's even a problem, you know? And I think I've put everything in the context of VUCA world and this as well, because my impression of the way most of us are living, maybe worse with young people, but all of us, is we're present all day to this stream of external random stimuli, social media, phone call, text, you know, this is my whole day, and that's it. And I think we really need to help people, even force people to acquire some habit of stepping back and doing some reflection on what's really happening, you know? And I think that's a pushback we need to do, and maybe without that, people won't, you know, if they have no way of stepping and thinking and examining, then I think they're much more prone to the kind of problem you're raising here. And of course, this is what Jesuits do with their examen, but people can do it any kind of way. And I always like this image that Ron Heifetz, the Harvard guy, used, that good leaders need to have a habit every day of getting away from the dance floor and onto the balcony. In other words, getting some perspective on the middle of the mess they were in the middle of. So this is the first comment I would make. And then the second comment I would make is, you know, I think often in business school, we don't really spend time on decision-making itself. You know, like maybe we teach people how to calculate present value, how to use an Excel spreadsheet, some of these strict methodologies for making a business decision. But of course, most problems in life are most important problems in life. Should we fire this one, hire this one? Should we merge with the other company? What kind of compensation arrangement is fair? Those are not just present value calculations. They're very complicated human decisions. And one of my criticisms of business schools generally is we don't equip human beings with the tools to make thoughtful decisions that sure involve spreadsheet matter, but also matters of values, also matters of guesses about the future, also matters of how should human beings be treated. And you know, I feel like schools could do a better job of equipping people with some kind of human methodology for making decisions, and indirectly part of doing that is to deal with facts and reality rather than just opinions. So I didn't solve your problem because I believe you articulated a difficult problem, but maybe in a smaller way introduce a couple of thoughts that might help indirectly.
Quite value-adding, so thank you.
In the same line, I would like you to give a personal experience. And I'll try not to make it a criticism to DBS. But I enrolled DBS when it was called La Comercial in 1976, the same year that Arizmendiarrieta died. And at the time, the cooperatives were spread here in Basque Land. And in Deusto University, the principal was Dionisio Aranzadi, who was economist himself, but he was teaching in the sociology faculty, not in DBS. And he had done research and written a book which was something like Industrial Cooperativism, Theory and Facts, being facts, the experience of the Mondragon cooperatives. So he gave a course which was open to students of other faculties, and I dare to say that I was the only student of DBS who went to his course. And the fact is that in 5 years here studying business administration, nobody said a word on cooperativism, even Basque or otherwise, even if that has been developed into an alternative way of seeing management tools. And the fact that I want to stress is that something which was most interesting from a sociological point of view was not relevant from a business administration approach. And that's what can happen with knowledge, and that's what can happen with humanistic leadership, that it can be extremely interesting from an intellectual point of view, but not so easy to put into practice.
Okay, thank you. So I think we will have the last question because we are running out of time. So.
Well, good morning. Thank you very much both for your sharing with us your comments. While listening to you, there was a word that I had in mind that, funny enough, either of you have mentioned, that's impact. And that would be perhaps my first question or my first thought. How do you connect impact with leadership and with new models of leadership? And secondly, I work in a research and technology organization. Nowadays we manage with a classical profit and loss account, balance sheets, and so on. But we are trying to evolve into managing through impact. At present, we have managed to quantify our impact through indicators, but we really don't know how to go to the next step, managing through impact. Do you have or do you know any experiences all over the world about how we can evolve to that, or anything that you could say on this, both of you? Thank you very much.
Yeah. So, for example, the question would be, in the case of what I said, something like, how do we understand the actual impact of good leadership or not? Is it? For example.
Yes, and how can that also impact on the management of the organization where you belong? Yeah.
Yeah, it's another great question, a very and also a very complicated, difficult question, you know. So, and let me try to relate it to my experience in the healthcare system. So I just finished, as you heard in the introduction, as a board chair of a very large hospital system in the US, about 140 hospitals. So I want to separate two things, some of the impact of what we did and the impact of leadership. So there are, and for the first part, how do we measure the impact of what we did? I think part of the challenge is to be clear about impact you want to have beyond the superficial indicators that everybody will have. Huh? So bond analysts or healthcare researchers have things that they want to look at. What is these guys' debt ratio? What is their profitability? What is their level of infections or something? Same for everybody. Okay, we care about those things. But also, when we thought about our mission, so now let's raise the conversation a little bit, we thought, okay, we want to try to see that people who are marginalized in the US system, people who have no insurance, people who are black, people who are women in poor neighborhoods, can have good healthcare outcomes. Nobody is measuring this kind of thing. We had our data people even to get the data is incredibly complicated. You know, down to a neighborhood, can we assess whether a black man has better health outcomes for cancer than a white man? Very difficult, even to begin to analyze that. So this was a big problem, just to get the data. And then the next step was we not only said to different regional managers, okay, this is part of your job, but also we said part of your pay will be on what impact you have had on this specific thing. So I guess the first comment I want to make is are we able and willing to articulate some of the specific impact we want to have and how we will know we've achieved it. And I think often people leave things at a rhetorical level and are unwilling to do the difficult work of trying to articulate specific impacts like I described and so on. Now, the next level question is, what impact, so to speak, did good leadership have in getting us to this point? And that's a good but difficult question. I mean, I know, I'm not talking about myself, huh? I mean, it's the CEO more than me. I know for a fact that we would not have gotten there without good leadership. But how do I measure the impact of our leadership as a board, the CEO's leadership, in getting us to that point where there's so many levels of initiative that have to be shown and interaction? It's a good and difficult problem. And I think we all know intuitively you can see the difference in good leadership. But when you say very fairly, okay, how do I assess it, measure it, what's the metrics? It's not easy to do. Now, if you're happy with me, you'll be completely unhappy at this point. There was a famous Supreme Court case in the United States that involved pornography. You can understand? It's the same in Spanish, yeah? Pornografía?
Yeah.
Pornography. And the justices had to make a ruling that involved some definitions about pornography. And one of the famous Supreme Court justices, this is 2 generations ago, his comment was, well, it's very hard for me to define it, but I know it when I see it. And somehow leadership is a little like pornography. Sometimes it's hard for me to, I can't answer exactly your question. It's a fair question. But boy, corporations that have good leadership or don't, somehow we see the difference. It's not a satisfying answer to you. It's the best I can do. Yeah.
Well, Chris hasn't mentioned something that I think is quite useful, which is that he's written a workbook on leadership. And I think that following your book, you could be able to get a self-reflection on the impact of your own leadership, I think. It's a full book, and it's something, I suppose, aligned with the Jesuit exercises, because I think that the line is more or less similar.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for saying. Afterward, I'll give you the money I promised
okay.
for promoting.
I will have to buy the book.
You will need to buy the book. Okay, so thank you, Jon. Thank you, Chris. It was a real pleasure having you here and having this conversation. And now I think we can continue the conversation with a coffee in an informal way and continue networking a little bit. So thank you very much.
Thank you.